I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday in March. Cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing that probably cost more per piece than I spent on groceries in a week. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Whitmore request the honor of your presence. I had to read it twice before I realized my son was getting married, and I was being informed, not consulted. No phone call, no visit, just an invitation in the mail, like I was a distant relative they felt obligated to include. I set it on my kitchen counter next to the stack of past due notices and stared at it for a long time. Daniel was 28 now, successful in his tech job, living in a downtown loft that cost more in monthly rent than I made in 6 months at the insurance office. He'd been with Eliza for 3 years, and I'd met her exactly twice, both times brief. Awkward encounters where she looked at my small apartment and my discount store clothes with the kind of polite disgust wealthy people perfect. The wedding was set for June 15th, a Saturday, at the country club where Eliza's family held membership, a place where I was certain I would stick out like a grass stain on white linen. In the corner of the invitation, in small print, it read black tie optional. I ran my fingers over the embossed letters, feeling the indentation in the expensive paper. Black tie optional. I had never owned anything that could pass for black tie in my life. My one decent dress was navy blue and 5 years old, purchased for Daniel's college graduation. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Daniel's number. We spoke maybe once a month now. Brief conversations that left me feeling like I was interviewing for the position of mother in his life, a position I was increasingly unqualified for. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. "Oh, hey, Mom." His voice had that distracted quality it always carried when he talked to me, like he was simultaneously checking emails or scrolling through his phone. "You got the invitation?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "I did," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "Congratulations, honey. Eliza seems lovely." A pause. "Yeah, she is. Listen, about the wedding," I continued. "I'm so happy for you both. When would be a good time to help with planning? I know these things can be expensive, and I've been saving." "Mom, stop." His voice sharpened. "We don't need help. Eliza's parents are handling everything. It's all taken care of." I gripped the phone tighter. "I'm not talking about money, Daniel. I'm talking about being involved. Mother-son dance, helping choose flowers, tasting cake. We've already done all that." The words hit me like a physical blow. Done all that, without me, without even telling me it was happening. "Look, just show up on the day, okay?" he continued. "Wear something nice, but not too, you know, conservative," I supplied, my voice steady despite the familiar ache spreading through my chest. "I wouldn't want to embarrass anyone." "It's not about embarrassing. Never mind, I have to go. Eliza's making dinner." The line went dead, and I sat in my silent apartment, staring at the invitation. Black tie optional. Something nice, but not to me. I understood perfectly. That night, I opened my closet and looked at my clothes with new eyes. Everything suddenly seemed shabby, outdated, unworthy. I pulled out the navy dress I'd worn to Daniel's graduation. It was simple, modest, and obviously cheap next to what the Whitmores and their friends would be wearing. I thought about calling my son back, asking directly if I should be part of the rehearsal dinner, if there was a bridal shower I should attend, but I already knew the answer. The invitation was clear enough. I was a guest, not family, not really. Over the next 3 months, I saved every penny I could. I skipped meals, walked to work instead of taking the bus, canceled my cable subscription. By May, I had enough to buy a dress that wouldn't humiliate my son on his wedding day, deep emerald green, simple but elegant, from a department store that was several steps up from my usual thrift shop finds. I even splurged on new shoes and had my graying hair professionally styled for the first time in years. I wanted to look like I belonged, like I was worthy of being Daniel's mother. The sacrifice wasn't new to me. When Robert left us when Daniel was 7, I'd worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat: insurance data entry during the day, waitressing at night. Daniel never went without baseball equipment, computer for school, the right clothes to fit in with his friends. I made sure of it, even when it meant eating ramen noodles for dinner after he went to bed, or patching the same pair of shoes for another season. When Daniel got accepted to State University, I remortgaged the small house I'd inherited from my Aunt May to pay for his tuition. He never knew. I told him there was a small trust fund from his father's side, a fiction to preserve his pride and mine. Every month since his graduation, I'd been putting $500 into his savings account, money I earned working weekend shifts at a local convenience store on top of my regular job. The morning of the final fitting for my new dress, I checked my bank account and felt my stomach drop. There was an automatic payment to my credit card, the emergency one I'd given Daniel years ago, for $3,200. I called the card company. The charge was for Paradise Excursions, dated 3 days earlier. When I called Daniel, he answered on the first ring. Unusual for him. "Mom, I was just about to call you," he said, his voice unusually bright. "Great news, Eliza and I finalized our honeymoon plans. 2 weeks in Bali." I clutched the phone tighter. "That sounds wonderful, honey. I just saw a charge on my emergency card." "Oh, that..." His voice shifted, a touch defensive now. "Yeah, there was a limited time deposit deal. I was going to tell you. We'll pay you back, of course." "Of course," I echoed. We both knew he wouldn't. This wasn't the first time. The emergency card had paid for ski trips, a new laptop, concert tickets, all with vague promises of repayment that never materialized. "Thanks, Mom. You're the best. Look, I've got to run meeting with the wedding planner." Another meeting I hadn't known about. Another decision made without me. "Daniel," I said quickly, before he could hang up, "I was wondering about the rehearsal dinner. Should I? It's at Le Bistro on the 14th. Eliza's dad arranged it all. Just show up at 7, okay?" The line went dead again. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the emerald dress hanging on my closet door. $3,200. That was 2 months' rent, 6 months of groceries, more than I'd ever spent on myself at once. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt a familiar resignation. This was the pattern we'd fallen into, Daniel taking, me giving, neither of us acknowledging the imbalance. As I changed for my shift at the insurance office, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. At 54, my face showed every year of struggle and sacrifice. The lines around my eyes, the streak of gray I could never quite afford to cover properly. But there was something else there, too. Something I hadn't noticed before, a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. How long had I been accepting leftovers from my own life? 2 weeks before the wedding, I received an unexpected visitor. I was sorting through my mail, mostly bills and advertisements, when a knock came at my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw a well-dressed older woman I didn't recognize. Thinking she might be a neighbor or someone collecting for charity, I opened the door. "Jessica Brown?" the woman asked, her voice cultured but kind. "Yes, I'm Sarah Mitchell, Eliza's aunt." She extended her hand. "May I come in? I think we should talk." Puzzled, I invited her in, hastily clearing magazines from my small sofa to make room. Sarah Mitchell looked around my apartment with curious eyes, but without the judgment I'd seen from Eliza. I apologize for dropping by unannounced, she said, settling onto the sofa. But I wanted to meet you before the wedding chaos. That's very kind of you, I said, uncertain why Eliza's aunt would seek me out. Sarah's expression turned serious. I'll be direct, Jessica. I've noticed how you've been excluded from the wedding planning. It concerned me. I felt my face flush. I'm sure everyone's just busy. No, she interrupted gently. It's deliberate, and it's wrong. Eliza and my sister's family, they can be rather status conscious, but a mother should be part of her son's wedding. I didn't know what to say. Having my suspicions confirmed by an insider was both validating and painful. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. Sarah sighed. Because I was in your position once. My daughter married into a wealthy family who made it clear I wasn't quite what they'd hoped for. I stayed quiet, trying not to make waves. I regret that now. She reached into her handbag and pulled out an envelope. These are the details for all the remaining pre-wedding events. The cake tasting is tomorrow at 2. The final venue walkthrough is Thursday. The flower arrangement approval is Friday. And I stared at the envelope, emotions warring inside me. I don't think I'm invited to those. You're not, Sarah said bluntly. But you should be. And if you show up with me, no one will question it. I'm the eccentric aunt everyone tolerates because I'm richer than most of them combined. Her directness startled a laugh from me. Why would you do this for me? Sarah's eyes softened. Because families should be better than this. And because I've watched Eliza and her parents steamroll this entire wedding process. Daniel seems to have forgotten who supported him before he had a 6-figure tech job. He worked hard for his success, I said automatically. The defensive response of a mother. I'm sure he did, and I'm equally sure he didn't do it alone. Sarah stood up. The cake tasting tomorrow. Will you come? I looked at the emerald dress hanging in my bedroom doorway, at the stack of bills on my counter, at the framed photo of Daniel at his college graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling. Yes, I said. I'll come. The cake tasting was held in a boutique bakery downtown, the kind with no prices on display, because if you needed to ask, you couldn't afford it. Sarah met me outside, elegant in casual linen pants and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Ready, she asked, offering me an encouraging smile. I nodded, smoothing down my best work skirt and blouse, suddenly conscious of my scuffed pumps and drugstore makeup. Inside, Eliza, Daniel, and Mrs. Whitmore were already seated at a table covered with small plates of cake samples. Daniel looked up when the bell above the door announced our arrival, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion to something that looked disturbingly like embarrassment. Aunt Sarah, Eliza said, rising to kiss her aunt's cheek. We didn't know you were coming. Her eyes slid to me, narrowing slightly. Mrs. Brown, what a surprise. I invited Jessica, Sarah said cheerfully, pulling out a chair. Every mother should help choose her son's wedding cake. It's tradition. We've actually already narrowed it down to the chocolate ganache or the vanilla bourbon. Mrs. Whitmore said, her smile tight. We're just confirming today. Perfect timing then, Sarah replied, unperturbed. Jessica can help break the tie. Daniel finally found his voice. Mom, you didn't need to come all this way. We have it handled. I wanted to be here, I said, meeting his eyes. It's not every day my only son gets married. A flicker of something guilt recognition crossed his face before he looked away. The baker brought 2 more place settings, and for the next hour, I sat through the most uncomfortable cake tasting imaginable. Mrs. Whitmore spoke over me. Eliza barely acknowledged my presence, and Daniel seemed caught between worlds. occasionally shooting me apologetic glances, but never quite standing up for my right to be there. Only Sarah treated me normally, asking my opinion, laughing at my small jokes, creating space for my voice in a room determined to drown it out. When it was time to make the final decision, Eliza looked to her mother, who nodded at the chocolate ganache. "That's the one," Eliza declared. "Actually," Daniel said, surprising everyone, "I think I prefer the vanilla bourbon. Mom, what do you think?" All eyes turned to me. It was the first time he directly asked for my input. I took a small bite of each cake again, considering carefully. The chocolate is richer, more dramatic. The vanilla is subtle, with layers of flavor that reveal themselves slowly. I looked at my son. Like the best relationships. A moment of silence followed. "Vanilla bourbon it is," Daniel said firmly, and for the first time that day, he smiled at me a real smile, not the strained politeness he'd been maintaining. As we left the bakery, Daniel hung back to walk beside me. "Thanks for coming, Mom," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I didn't think to invite you myself." It wasn't a full apology or recognition of the larger pattern, but it was something, a crack in the wall that had been building between us. "I'll see you at the flower appointment," he asked, a tentative olive branch. Before I could answer, Eliza called him over to their waiting car, a sleek BMW that gleamed in the afternoon sun. "Daniel, we're late for our meeting with the band." He gave me an apologetic shrug and jogged over to Eliza, leaving me standing on the sidewalk with Sarah. "Progress," Sarah said, watching them drive away. "Small, but progress nonetheless." "Thank you," I said, "for everything today." Sarah linked her arm through mine as we walked toward the bus stop. "This is just the beginning. Jessica, you have more power than you realize. It's time you remembered that." I thought about her words that evening as I sewed a loose button on my work blouse. More power than you realize. What did that mean for a middle-aged woman with an entry-level job, a rented apartment, and a son who seemed embarrassed by her existence? Then my gaze fell on a folder tucked in my desk drawer, the deed to the house I'd inherited from Aunt May, the house I still owned but had been renting out since remortgaging it for Daniel's education, the house Daniel thought would someday be his inheritance. Next to it was my bank statement, showing the monthly $500 transfers to Daniel's savings account transfers he believed came from a non-existent trust fund. And in my jewelry box, beneath my few costume pieces, lay the only thing of real value. I owned my grandmother's diamond bracelet, appraised 10 years ago at $18,000. I'd nearly sold it countless times during lean years, but could never bring myself to part with it. Sarah was right. I did have power. I just wasn't used to using it. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Instead of my typical work outfit, I put on the one good suit I owned purchased years ago for job interviews and fastened my grandmother's bracelet around my wrist. It felt heavy, unfamiliar after sitting unworn for so long. I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years and took a bus downtown to Jefferson Bank. There, I asked to speak with a financial advisor. "I'd like to discuss changing some automatic payments," I told the young woman who introduced herself as Michelle, "and I have some questions about the deed to a property I own." By the time I left the bank 2 hours later, I had made decisions that would change everything, though Daniel wouldn't know it until after the wedding. For now, I would continue playing the role everyone expected: the grateful, undemanding mother who would accept whatever scraps of attention they deigned to throw her way. But inside, something had shifted. The woman who had been accepting leftovers for years was waking up, remembering her worth. I attended the flower appointment with Sarah the next day, and the venue walkthrough after that. Each time, my presence was tolerated rather than welcomed. Each time, Daniel seemed torn between embarrassment and guilt. Each time, I smiled and offered thoughtful opinions when asked, but otherwise kept my peace. I was playing a longer game now. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and barely recognized myself. The woman staring back looked polished, dignified in her emerald green dress. My hair, professionally styled, framed my face softly, minimizing the gray I usually couldn't afford to color. The makeup I'd splurged on smoothed the worry lines etched by years of struggle. For a moment, I let myself imagine Daniel's face when he saw me, maybe a flicker of pride, a moment where he introduced me to his new in-laws without that subtle wince I'd grown accustomed to. I fastened my grandmother's bracelet around my wrist, something old, something with history and meaning. Then I picked up my small beaded purse, checked once more that I had the invitation and directions, and left my apartment to attend my only son's wedding. I had no idea that in a few hours, I would discover there were limits to what even a mother's love could endure. The country club sat on perfectly manicured grounds that rolled toward a small lake. Luxury cars lined the circular drive BMWs, Mercedes, a few Teslas. My 15-year-old Honda Civic, freshly washed but still obviously ancient, looked like it had wandered into the wrong zip code. I handed my keys to a valet who barely managed to hide his grimace, then smoothed my dress and walked up the stone steps to the entrance. Inside, the lobby gleamed with marble and crystal. Guests mingled in clusters, their laughter echoing off high ceilings. The women wore designer dresses and jewelry that caught the light with every movement. The men had the relaxed confidence that comes with never having to check your bank balance before making a purchase. I spotted Daniel near the main staircase, resplendent in his black tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled. He was laughing at something Tom Whitmore was saying, his head thrown back in genuine amusement. Eliza stood beside him in a wedding dress that probably cost more than my annual salary, radiant and perfect. They looked like they belonged on a magazine cover. Decisively. I made my way over, my new shoes clicking against the marble floor. As I approached, Daniel's gaze found mine, and for just a moment, his smile faltered not with recognition or warmth, but with something that looked disturbingly like resignation. "Mom," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "You made it." "You look so handsome," I said, reaching up to straighten his bow tie, a gesture I'd done 1,000 times when he was younger, but now he stepped back slightly, just enough to break the contact. "Thanks. You look nice." The pause before nice lasted just long enough to sting. Tom Whitmore, a distinguished man with silver hair and a golf tan, extended his hand. "You must be Daniel's mother, Tom Whitmore." "Jessica Brown," I replied, shaking his hand. "Congratulations on gaining such a wonderful son-in-law." "Indeed." His smile was polite but distant. "Daniel tells us you work in insurance." "I do. Data entry, mostly." I had learned not to oversell my modest position. "But today, I'm just the proud mother of the groom." Tom nodded and immediately turned his attention back to Daniel, launching into a story about the golf course at his vacation home in Hilton Head. I stood there for another moment, invisible again, before quietly moving away. As I navigated through the crowd, looking for my assigned seat for the ceremony, I noticed Sarah waving to me from across the room. She was dressed in a vibrant blue ensemble that somehow managed to be both age-appropriate and fashion-forward. "Jessica, darling," she said, air-kissing my cheeks European style. "You look absolutely stunning. That color is perfect on you." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by her warmth. "You look wonderful yourself." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "These events are always the same wealth on display and genuine emotion in short supply. But the open bar helps." She winked, linking her arm through mine. Come, I'll show you where we're sitting. And to my surprise, Sarah led me to the family section, just behind where Eliza's parents would sit. This is the mother of the groom's rightful place, she said firmly when I hesitated. I think they've assigned me somewhere else, I murmured, remembering Daniel's careful management of my role in his life. Nonsense. I've taken care of it. Sarah patted the seat beside her. I told them my arthritis acts up in drafty corners. No one questions an old lady's joint pain. Grateful for her intervention, I sat down, smoothing my dress over my knees. Guests continued to arrive, filling the rows behind us with a sea of designer labels and professionally styled hair. I felt eyes on me occasionally, curious glances from Eliza's relatives trying to place me in their social hierarchy. The string quartet began playing, signaling the ceremony was about to begin. Daniel appeared from a side door with his groomsmen college friends in matching tuxedos, all with the same confident bearing that came from lives of privilege. He took his place at the altar, scanning the crowd briefly. When his eyes found me in the family section, he blinked in surprise, but didn't have time to react further as the music changed and the bridal procession began. The ceremony was beautiful. Eliza floated down the aisle on her father's arm, a vision in white lace and silk. Daniel's eyes never left her as she approached, and when they exchanged vows, there was a love in his voice that I remembered from when he was small and would tell me about his day at school. But those moments felt like they belonged to someone else's son, someone else's life. I sat in the family section, behind Eliza's extended relatives, watching my child pledge his life to a woman who had barely acknowledged my existence. No one had asked for my blessing. No one had included me in the traditional mother-son moments that weddings usually hold. After the ceremony, as guests moved toward the reception hall, I lingered in the chapel, straightening my dress and trying to prepare myself for what came next. The reception would be harder, more time to feel out of place, more opportunities for small humiliations. But I was Daniel's mother. This was his wedding day. I would endure whatever came next, because that's what mothers do. I had no idea that in a few hours, I would discover exactly what I was willing to endure and what I wasn't. Are you all right? Sarah appeared beside me, her expression concerned. Just taking a moment, I said, forcing a smile. She studied me carefully. You know, we could leave. Go get a real drink somewhere and toast the happy couple from afar. The offer was tempting, so tempting, I had to clench my hands to resist it. I can't, I said finally. He's my son. Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. Then straighten that lovely bracelet. Hold your head high, and remember you've earned your place here more than most of these people. I touched my grandmother's bracelet, drawing strength from its connection to my past. Then I followed Sarah into the reception hall, prepared to face whatever came next with as much dignity as I could muster. What I wasn't prepared for was just how much that dignity would be tested. The reception hall was a vision of understated elegance, white linens, crystal stemware, and centerpieces that looked like they'd been arranged by florists who charged more per hour than I made in a day. Round tables for 8 dotted the room, each one a careful ecosystem of social hierarchy. I found my name card at table 7, tucked in the back corner near the kitchen doors. Sarah frowned when she saw it. This won't do at all, she murmured, scanning the room. Come with me. And before I could protest, she had snatched up my place card and was marching toward the front of the room. I hurried after her, acutely aware of curious glances from the other guests. Sarah, please, I whispered. I don't want to cause a scene. You won't, she replied firmly. I will. She stopped at table 3, which I could see was populated with place cards for Eliza's relatives. With nimble fingers, she rearranged several cards, placing mine between hers and an elderly gentleman's. "There," she said with satisfaction. "Uncle George is nearly deaf, and I can't abide Sandra's gossip. You'll be doing me a favor sitting here." I glanced nervously toward the head table, where the wedding planner was directing the catering staff. "Won't someone notice?" Darling, the beauty of these events is that everyone is too concerned with appearances to question anything directly. Sarah patted my arm. "Trust me." And Uncle George turned out to be a retired history professor with a dry wit who, despite Sarah's assessment, could hear perfectly well when the conversation interested him. He asked thoughtful questions about my work and Daniel's childhood, showing more interest in 5 minutes than the Whitmores had in 3 years. As the room filled, I watched the careful choreography of wealth and connection unfolding around me. At table 1, directly in front of the head table where Daniel and Eliza would sit, were the Whitmores and their closest family friends. Table 2 held Daniel's college buddies and their partners, all looking successful and at ease in this environment. I caught sight of Daniel entering the reception hall, Eliza on his arm. They paused at the entrance for photographs, looking radiant and perfectly matched. When they began making their rounds, I watched my son work the room like a politician, shaking hands, sharing laughs, playing the perfect groom. But as the minutes ticked by, I noticed something that made my chest tighten. He visited every table except ours. I told myself he was saving the best for last. I told myself he was busy. I told myself anything that would keep the growing hollow feeling in my stomach from expanding. "Don't look so worried," Sarah said, following my gaze. "He'll come around eventually." "Of course he will," I replied, more confidently than I felt. "He's just busy." The cocktail hour stretched on, and the hollow feeling grew. When dinner was finally served, the waitstaff moved with practiced efficiency, delivering plates to the head table first, then working their way through the hierarchy tables 1 through 6, received their meals beautifully plated salmon with asparagus and roasted potatoes. The food still steaming. By the time they reached our table, it was clear the kitchen was running behind. Uncle George received his plate first, then Sarah, then 2 of Eliza's cousins. Then they ran out. "I'm so sorry," the server said, looking genuinely embarrassed. "There was a miscommunication in the kitchen. Your meals will be out in just a few minutes." 20 minutes passed, then 30. Around us, the other guests had finished eating and moved on to toasts and speeches. I sat with my empty place setting, my stomach growling quietly, watching my son laugh at his new father-in-law's jokes. Finally, a different server appeared with a plate. The salmon was cold, the asparagus limp, the potatoes congealed with a skin of cooling grease. It looked like the kind of meal you'd find under a heat lamp at a cheap buffet kitchen scraps. "Kitchen scraps," Sarah whispered sympathetically. "This is inexcusable." But I smiled and picked up my fork. "It's fine," I said. "I'm just happy to be here." The truth was, I was used to leftovers, used to being last, used to making do with whatever remained after everyone else had taken their share. This was just another variation on a familiar theme. I was halfway through my cold salmon when I heard Daniel's voice carrying across the room as he stood to give his thank you speech. But before he addressed the crowd, he was talking to Eliza, his voice just loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Did you see they finally brought my mom her food?" He gestured toward my table with a grin that looked cruel in the soft lighting. "She's used to eating what life leaves behind, so she won't mind." Eliza laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. Several people at the head table joined in, following her lead. The sound rippled outward as Daniel's college friends picked up on the joke, their wives covering their mouths to hide their giggles. I set down my fork carefully, my hand steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Sarah looked horrified. "Did he just—" "Fine," I said again, but the word felt like ash in my mouth. Daniel continued his speech, thanking the Whitmores for welcoming him into their family, thanking his friends for their support, thanking Eliza for making him the luckiest man alive. He thanked the caterers, the musicians, even the florists. He never mentioned me. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. Glasses clinked, people wiped tears from their eyes, and Daniel bent to kiss his bride as if he'd just delivered the most heartfelt speech ever given. I sat in my corner, surrounded by cold food and the echoing memory of my son's laughter at my expense, and felt something inside me break cleanly in two. Not shatter, that would have been messier, more dramatic. This was precise, surgical, the final severance of whatever connection I'd been desperately trying to maintain. Sarah placed her hand over mine. Jessica. I slid my hand away gently. I think I need some air. I rose from the table, making my way toward the terrace doors at the far end of the room. No one noticed me leaving, not Daniel, not Eliza, not any of the guests who had spent the evening pretending I didn't exist. Outside, the night air was cool against my flushed skin. The terrace overlooked the golf course, silver blue in the moonlight. I gripped the stone balustrade, letting the rough texture ground me as I fought to steady my breathing. I felt rather than heard someone join me on the terrace, expecting Sarah. I turned to find Uncle George, his kind face concerned in the dim light. "Not much for speeches, myself," he said conversationally, as if we were discussing the weather. "Too much preening, not enough substance." I attempted a smile. "They seem to enjoy it." He leaned against the balustrade beside me. "You know, I've known the Whitmores for 40 years. Tom and I were at Princeton together." I wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected confidence. "Never much cared for them," he continued. "Too concerned with appearances. No real character." He glanced at me. "Your son seems like he has potential, though underneath all, this." He waved his hand to encompass the reception. "He used to," I said softly. Uncle George nodded sagely. "Money changes people. Or rather, it reveals them." He straightened his bow tie. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "Do," I echoed. "Yes, do. After what I just witnessed in there, surely you're not planning to simply continue as before?" His directness startled me. I don't know." "Well, think about it," he said, patting my shoulder awkwardly. "A good life isn't about what happens to you, it's about how you respond." With that peculiar bit of wisdom, he ambled back inside, leaving me alone with the moonlight and my thoughts. What was I going to do? The question echoed in my mind as I stared out at the perfect grounds, the perfect night, the perfect wedding that had made it abundantly clear I was an imperfection to be tolerated, not celebrated. The dancing began after dinner. Daniel and Eliza glided across the floor for their first dance, looking like something out of a fairy tale. Then came the parent dances, Tom Whitmore spinning Eliza with practiced grace, Eliza's mother swaying sentimentally with Daniel. I waited for Daniel to find me, for our dance. I had imagined this moment for months, had even practiced a few steps in my living room while old music played from my phone. But as the evening wore on and other family members joined the dancing, it became clear that no invitation was coming. Daniel was too busy, too important, too caught up in his new life to remember the woman who had raised him alone after his father left when he was 7, the woman who had worked double shifts to pay for his baseball equipment, who had helped him with algebra homework at the kitchen table every night, who had driven him to college in her falling apart car and cried in the parking lot after saying goodbye. Sarah touched my arm gently. "Are you all right, dear?" I looked around the room at the laughter and celebration, at my son spinning on the dance floor with his beautiful wife, at the life he had built that had no place for me in it. For the first time all evening, I felt completely clear about what was happening. "I'm perfect," I said, and meant it. I stood up, smoothing my emerald dress one last time. I walked to the coat check, retrieved my purse, and headed for the exit. No one noticed me leaving, not Daniel, not Eliza, not any of the guests who had spent the evening pretending I didn't exist. But as I reached the lobby, I heard footsteps behind me. "Mrs. Brown." It was Sarah, slightly out of breath. "Are you leaving?" "I am," without saying goodbye. I turned to look back through the doorway at the reception still in full swing. Daniel was at the bar now, surrounded by his friends. His tie loosened and his face flushed with champagne and happiness. He looked young and carefree and completely unburdened by thoughts of his mother. "He won't notice," I said simply. Sarah's face crumpled with sympathy. "I'm so sorry. The way he spoke about you, that wasn't right." "No," I agreed. "It wasn't." But as I walked to my car under the soft glow of the country club's landscape lighting, I wasn't thinking about apologies or sympathy. I was thinking about the email I would write when I got home, the one that would arrive in Daniel's inbox tomorrow morning while he was still recovering from his wedding hangover, the one that would change everything. I drove home in complete silence, no radio, no thoughts. Just the steady rhythm of my heartbeat and the white lines disappearing under my headlights. The woman who had entered that country club 6 hours ago, hopeful, nervous, still believing in the possibility of reconciliation, was gone. In her place sat someone I was just beginning to meet. My apartment felt different when I walked in, smaller, but also cleaner somehow, stripped of illusions. I hung my emerald dress in the closet next to my work clothes and changed into jeans and a t-shirt. Then I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and began to compose the most important email of my life. I didn't write it in anger. Anger would have been messy, emotional, easy to dismiss. Instead, I wrote it with the precision of someone who had finally stopped pretending that love could exist without respect. "Daniel, I'm writing this while your wedding day is still fresh in my memory, though I suspect the details that matter to me are different from the ones you'll remember. I want to thank you for the clarity you provided tonight. Your comment about me being used to eating what life leaves behind was illuminating, not because it was cruel, though it was, but because it was honest. For the first time in years, you told me exactly what you think of me. You're right. I have spent most of my adult life accepting leftovers. Leftover time after you'd given your best hours to friends and girlfriends. Leftover attention after everyone more important had been tended to. Leftover consideration after everyone else's needs had been met. I accepted this because I believed that's what love looked like, that being your mother meant, being grateful for whatever scraps of affection you chose to throw my way. But tonight, watching you laugh while I sat with my cold dinner, I realized something important. I taught you to treat me like leftovers. Every time I accepted less than basic human decency, I was showing you that I believed I deserved less than basic human decency. I won't be making that mistake anymore. Effective immediately. I am withdrawing all financial support I have been providing. This includes 1. The $500 monthly deposits I've been making to your savings account since you graduated college. You thought those came from your trust fund, but there is no trust fund. It was me, working overtime and skipping meals so you could build your nest egg. 2. The life insurance policy that names you as beneficiary. The policy I've maintained for 12 years, paying premiums that often meant I had to choose between groceries and gas. 3. The credit card I opened for your emergencies, the one you've used 17 times in the past 2 years for everything from car repairs to vacation deposits, always with promises to pay me back that somehow never materialized. Most importantly, I am selling the house, yes. Daniel, I own the house where you grew up, the house you assume will someday be yours. I never told you this because I wanted you to succeed on your own merits, not because you were waiting for an inheritance. The house is worth approximately $340,000 in today's market. I plan to sell it within the next 6 months. I will be using that money to travel, to live, to finally experience some of the things I postponed while I was busy being invisible in your life. You asked me once why I never remarried after your father left. The truth is, I was so busy being your mother that I forgot to be anything else. I poured everything I had into raising you, believing that someday you would see all the sacrifices as acts of love rather than signs of weakness. I was wrong about many things, but I was especially wrong about this. I thought that if I loved you enough, you would eventually love me back, not as the woman who cleaned your messes and funded your mistakes, but as a person worthy of basic respect. Tonight, you made it clear that will never happen. I'm not angry, Daniel. Anger implies that I expected better. Instead, I'm grateful. You freed me from the exhausting work of trying to earn love from someone incapable of giving it. Don't mistake this for a threat or an attempt at manipulation. I'm not looking for an apology or trying to punish you into better behavior. I'm simply informing you that the Bank of Mom is permanently closed. I hope your marriage brings you happiness. I hope Eliza gives you everything you need. And I hope that someday, when you have children of your own, you'll understand the difference between loving someone and respecting them. You will always be my son, but I will no longer be your safety net. Jessica. I read the email 3 times before sending it, each word measured, deliberate, true. There was no pleading, no room for negotiation, no hidden message begging him to prove me wrong. At 3:47 a.m., I clicked send. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, the expensive bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion that never came, and began planning my new life. By Sunday afternoon, I had contacted a realtor. By Monday, I had found a financial advisor. By Tuesday, I had started researching extended stay apartments in cities I'd never visited. By Wednesday, I had scheduled vacation days for the first time in 3 years. Daniel's response came Thursday morning, exactly as I had predicted it would. Mom, what the hell is this email? Are you having some kind of breakdown? I think you misunderstood what happened at the wedding. It was just a joke. Everyone was laughing, not just at you. You're being way too sensitive about this. Can we talk like adults? I know you're upset, but selling the house is insane. That's my inheritance you're talking about. Dad would roll over in his grave if he knew you were threatening to give away my future like this. Eliza thinks you might be having some kind of midlife crisis. She knows a therapist who specializes in women your age who are struggling with empty nest syndrome. I can set up an appointment if you want. Let's just calm down and talk this through. I'll come over Sunday and we can figure this out. Daniel. I deleted the email without responding. Saturday brought another message. This one shorter and more demanding. Mom, I've been trying to call you for 2 days. Pick up your phone. We need to discuss this house situation before you do something stupid. I talked to a lawyer, and you can't just cut me out of my inheritance like this. Call me back. I had changed my phone number on Friday. Sunday's email was different in tone. Jessica, I'm sorry for what I said at the wedding. I was drunk and I wasn't thinking. You know I love you, and I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. But this whole thing is getting out of hand. Eliza's parents are asking questions about why my mother is acting crazy, and it's embarrassing for both of us. Look, I'll pay you back for whatever money you think I owe you. We can work out a payment plan, but you can't sell the house. I have friends who are interested in buying it from you at a fair price if you really need the money right now. Let's just meet and talk this through face to face. I'll take you to dinner somewhere nice, and we can sort all this out. Daniel. I forwarded this email to my realtor with a note. Please expedite the listing process. The house went on the market Tuesday morning. It had 3 showings by Thursday and 2 offers by the weekend. I accepted the higher offer, $15,000, over asking price, cash deal, 30-day closing. Daniel's final email arrived that Sunday. You win. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but congratulations, you've managed to destroy our relationship and humiliate me in front of my new family. I hope whatever point you think you're making is worth losing your son over. Don't contact me again. I'm done trying to fix whatever is broken in you. I printed this email and put it in a folder labeled Evidence, not for any legal purpose, but as a reminder of who my son really was when he thought I might stop funding his lifestyle. The closing on the house was scheduled for July 20th. I had already put deposits down on a furnished apartment in Savannah and booked a month-long stay in a bed and breakfast in Vermont for the fall. For the first time in 30 years. I was making plans that had nothing to do with Daniel's needs, Daniel's schedule, or Daniel's approval. The woman who had raised him was gone. In her place was someone who was finally ready to live for herself. The house sold on a Tuesday. I signed the papers in a conference room that smelled like leather and expensive cologne, surrounded by strangers who treated this transaction like any other business deal, which I suppose it was. The check was substantial enough to make the banker raise her eyebrows slightly as she processed the deposit $355,000 after fees and commissions. More money than I had ever held at one time. More money than Daniel had ever imagined I possessed. I drove past the house one last time after the closing. The new owners had already moved in a young couple with a toddler who was riding a plastic tricycle in the driveway where Daniel used to practice basketball shots. They looked happy, oblivious to the decades of sacrifice and disappointment that had played out within those walls. I felt nothing looking at it, no nostalgia, no regret. It was just a building now, holding someone else's dreams. My phone, the new number Daniel didn't have, had remained blissfully silent for 3 weeks. But that evening, as I was packing the last of my belongings for the move to Savannah, someone knocked on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw Eliza standing in the hallway, looking perfectly composed in her designer clothes and subtle makeup. She was alone. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Jessica. Her voice was carefully modulated, the tone she probably used with difficult clients at whatever PR firm she worked for. May I come in? I think we need to talk. I don't think we do. Please. She gestured vaguely at the space between us. This whole situation has gotten out of hand. I stepped aside and let her enter, more out of curiosity than courtesy. She took in my half-packed boxes and bare walls with the same polite assessment she'd used when evaluating my dress at the wedding. Coffee, I offered, though I hoped she'd decline. That would be lovely. I made 2 cups from the instant coffee that was all I had left, serving them in mismatched mugs. Eliza accepted hers with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I want you to know that I had no idea Daniel was financially dependent on you to such an extent, she said, sipping her coffee delicately. He never mentioned the monthly deposits or the credit card arrangement. I'm sure he didn't. When I married him, I assumed his savings account represented his own financial discipline. If I had known, she trailed off, letting me fill in the blanks about what a responsible woman like her would have done. Would it have mattered, Eliza? Her composure flickered slightly. Of course it would have mattered. I don't believe in adults relying on their parents indefinitely. But now that we know about these arrangements, we can work something out. Daniel's salary is quite good, and with my income, we can certainly manage a reasonable repayment plan. There's nothing to repay, I said. I was giving gifts to my son, gifts that I'm no longer in a position to give. Jessica. Eliza leaned forward, her voice taking on a more urgent tone. I need you to understand something. Daniel's reputation at his company is suffering. When he couldn't make his car payment last month because of this misunderstanding, he had to borrow money from his boss. That's not the kind of thing that looks good when promotion time comes around. I waited for her to continue, my face neutral. The credit card situation has been particularly problematic. He had several automatic payments set up: his gym membership, his professional development courses. Even our honeymoon was partially charged to that card. When those payments started bouncing, it created complications. I can imagine. We had to move out of our loft. The rent was, she gestured helplessly. We're staying with my parents temporarily while we figure out our housing situation. This was new information. Daniel and Eliza, the golden couple, living in his in-laws' guest room because the Bank of Mom had closed permanently. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. Are you, for the first time? Eliza's mask slipped completely. Because honestly, Jessica, I don't think you are. I think you're enjoying this. I considered her words carefully. Was I enjoying it? Daniel's financial scrambling? His damaged reputation? His wounded pride? I'm not enjoying his difficulties, I said finally. But I'm not responsible for them, either. Daniel is 28 years old. If he can't manage his finances without his mother's secret subsidies, that's a problem he created. So this is some kind of lesson, tough love. This is me stepping aside and letting him experience the natural consequences of his choices. And what about the house? That's not a natural consequence. That's vindictive. I looked at this perfectly groomed woman who had married my son for love, but stayed married to him because she thought he came with financial security she hadn't had to provide herself. The house was mine to sell. I earned it. I paid for it. I maintained it. Daniel assumed it would someday be his, but assumptions aren't legal documents. But surely, I stood up, signaling that this conversation was over. Daniel made his position clear at your wedding. I said, I'm used to eating what life leaves behind. Well, I've decided I'm not hungry for leftovers anymore. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her recalibrating, trying to find an angle that might work where direct appeal had failed. What if Daniel apologized? Really apologized? Would that make a difference? No. What if we invited you to dinner, made sure you felt included in our lives going forward? No. Then what do you want? The question came out as almost a shout, her composure finally cracking completely. What would it take for you to stop punishing him? I'm not punishing him, Eliza. I'm just not rescuing him anymore. There's a difference. She gathered her purse and stood, her movements sharp with frustration. You know what I think? I think you're bitter because your life didn't turn out the way you wanted it to. And now you're taking it out on Daniel because he's successful and happy. I walked her to the door, unmoved by her analysis. Daniel's success was built on a foundation I provided without his knowledge. His happiness was subsidized by my poverty. Now we'd see what he could build on his own. After she left, I finished packing in peace. The next morning, I loaded my car with everything I owned that mattered: 2 suitcases, a box of books, and my laptop, and drove south toward a life I had never imagined possible. In Savannah, I rented a small apartment 4 blocks from the river. The rent was reasonable, the neighborhood was walkable, and for the first time in decades, I could afford it without sacrificing other necessities. I found a part-time job at a local bookstore, nothing glamorous, but enough to supplement my savings while I figured out what came next. The owner, a woman named Rita who was about my age, offered me the position the same day I applied. You seem like someone who understands that books are more than just inventory, she said after our brief interview. For 3 months, I lived quietly, anonymously, peacefully. I read books I'd never had time for, took long walks along the river, learned to cook meals for one person without feeling sorry for myself. I heard nothing from Daniel, which was exactly what I expected. But then, on a Thursday afternoon in October, Rita handed me a phone message. "Someone called looking for you," she said. "Said he was your son. He sounded," she paused, searching for the right word, "desperate." I stared at the phone message for a long time. Daniel had somehow tracked me down, found the bookstore, convinced Rita to take a message. The fact that he'd gone to such lengths told me everything I needed to know about his current state of desperation. "Did he say what he wanted?" I asked. "Just that it was urgent and he needed to speak with you. He left a number." She studied my face carefully. "You don't look happy about hearing from him." "I'm not. Family's complicated," she said with the wisdom of someone who'd lived long enough to understand that blood doesn't automatically create bonds worth maintaining. I folded the message and put it in my pocket. 3 hours later, as I was shelving returns in the poetry section, I threw it away. But Daniel wasn't the type to give up easily when he needed something. 2 days later, he appeared at the bookstore in person. I was helping a customer find a biography when I looked up and saw him standing near the front door, scanning the store. He looked terrible thinner than I remembered. His clothes wrinkled, his usual confident posture replaced by something that resembled panic. I finished with my customer and walked over to him, my expression neutral. "Daniel." "Mom." His voice cracked slightly on the word. "Thank God. I've been trying to find you for weeks." I heard, "What do you want?" He glanced around the store, taking in my name tag, my sensible shoes, the life I'd built without him. "Can we talk somewhere private?" "We can talk here. Please, this is important." "There's a coffee shop next door." "I'll wait." I looked at this man who had once been my little boy, who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and tell me I was the best mom in the world. That child was gone, replaced by someone who only remembered I existed when he needed something. "I get off at 6:00. The coffee shop closes at 7:00. You have 1 hour. Relief flooded his face. "Thank you. I'll be waiting." At 6:01, I found him at a corner table, 2 cups already ordered. He'd gotten me a latte with extra foam, the way I used to drink them when he was in high school and we'd occasionally go to the mall together. The gesture was calculated to remind me of better times. I sat down without touching the coffee. "You look good," he said. "Rested?" "What do you want, Daniel?" He took a breath, composing himself. When he spoke, his voice had the rehearsed quality of someone who'd practiced this conversation multiple times. "I want to apologize for everything. The wedding, the way I spoke to you, the way I took you for granted all these years. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. I waited for more. I know I hurt you, and I know saying sorry doesn't fix everything that's happened. But I'm hoping we can start over, build a better relationship going forward." "Are you?" "Yes, I've learned a lot about myself over the past few months, about what really matters, and what matters is family." Interesting timing for this revelation. His carefully composed expression flickered. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's curious that you discovered the importance of family right around the time your financial situation became difficult." This isn't about money." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "Isn't it because Eliza paid me a visit a few months ago? She was quite informative about your current circumstances." Daniel's face flushed. "Eliza had no right to involve you in our problems." "So you admit you have problems?" "Everyone has problems. Mom, that's not—" "Look, I know what you're thinking, but this isn't about the money. Yes, things have been tight since we, but we're managing. I got a promotion at work, Eliza's taking on more clients. We're fine. Then why are you here? The question hung in the air between us. Daniel stared into his coffee cup, his composure finally beginning to crack. Because I miss you, he said quietly. Because I realize what I lost. What did you lose, Daniel? My mother, my family, the person who always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. The person who always rescued you. You mean? That's not fair. Isn't it because I've been thinking about our relationship over the past few months, and I've realized something interesting? You never called me just to talk. You never visited unless you needed something. You never included me in your life unless it benefited you somehow. So when you say you miss me, what exactly do you miss? Daniel's hands were shaking slightly as he reached for his coffee. I miss having a mother who loved me. I did love you. I loved you so much that I forgot to require you to love me back. I do love you. No, Daniel. You love what I provided: the safety net, the financial support, the unconditional acceptance of your choices, no matter how they affected me. You loved having a mother who asked for nothing and gave everything. That's not true. I opened my purse and pulled out my phone, scrolling to the photo gallery. Do you know what I've been doing for the past 4 months? He shook his head. I went to Charleston and took a cooking class. I learned to make paella from scratch. I visited Asheville and hiked parts of the Blue Ridge Parkway. I spent 2 weeks in Vermont watching the leaves change colors. I've read 37 books, learned to play chess, and started taking Spanish lessons online. I showed him photos me laughing with my cooking class, standing on mountain overlooks, reading in a hammock strung between 2 oak trees. I've been living, Daniel, for the first time in 30 years. I've been living for myself instead of waiting for you to need me. But you could still do those things. We could even do some of them together. Could we? When was the last time you expressed interest in doing anything with me that wasn't connected to a favor you needed? Silence. I'll wait, I said. More silence. The truth is, Daniel, you never saw me as a person. I was a function, the mom function. And when that function became inconvenient or embarrassing, you made jokes about it at your wedding reception. I was drunk. I didn't mean. You meant every word. Drunk people don't lie. Daniel, they just stop editing their thoughts before they speak them. He was crying now, tears sliding down his cheeks as the full weight of what he'd lost began to settle on him. But I felt nothing, no urge to comfort him, no maternal instinct to make it better. What can I do? He whispered. Tell me what I can do to fix this. Nothing. There has to be something, some way to earn your forgiveness. I'm not angry enough to need to forgive you. Daniel, forgiveness implies that I'm holding on to hurt, waiting for you to heal it, but I'm not hurt anymore. I'm free. I don't understand. I know you don't. That's exactly the problem. I stood up, leaving my untouched latte on the table. Daniel looked up at me with the expression of someone watching his entire world collapse. Wait, please, don't leave like this. I'm not leaving. Daniel, I left months ago. You just finally noticed. I walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. For what it's worth, I hope you learn to be happy with the life you chose, but you'll have to learn it without me. Outside, the Savannah evening was soft and warm. I walked slowly back to my apartment, past the squares filled with Spanish moss and the sound of jazz drifting from restaurant patios. Somewhere behind me, Daniel was probably still sitting at that table, trying to process the fact that his safety net was never coming back. Tomorrow, I would start planning my next adventure. Maybe Italy, maybe Colorado, maybe somewhere I'd never imagined going when I was too busy being someone's mother to be myself. The woman who had spent 30 years accepting leftovers was gone forever. In her place was someone who had finally learned that she deserved a seat at the table, or better yet, a table of her own. The morning sun streamed through the windows of my Savannah apartment, casting golden rectangles across the hardwood floor. I sat at my small kitchen table, a cup of coffee in one hand and my phone in the other, scrolling through photos from my recent trip to Santa Fe. 6 months had passed since my conversation with Daniel in the coffee shop. 6 months of discovery, growth, and an unexpected sense of peace. The bookstore job had evolved from a temporary position to something I genuinely loved. Rita had promoted me to assistant manager, giving me responsibility for ordering and events. Our book club nights were becoming popular in the neighborhood, drawing a regular crowd of interesting people I now counted as friends. I'd established routines that nourished rather than drained me: morning walks along the river, Sunday brunch with my new friend Meredith from the apartment upstairs, painting classes on Thursday evenings. I'd even started dating, something that would have been unimaginable a year ago. Nothing serious, just occasional dinners with Peter, a retired English professor who came into the bookstore looking for mystery novels and stayed to discuss literature. My phone chimed with a text from Rita. Don't forget, author event tonight at 7. Bringing the good cookies. I smiled, typing back a quick response. The small joys of a life built on my own terms still surprised me sometimes. As I rinsed my coffee cup in the sink, my phone rang. Unknown number, but with a familiar area code, Daniel's area code. My heart did a small, involuntary flip, but I let it go to voicemail. Whatever crisis he was facing now, it wasn't mine to solve. The voicemail notification appeared a minute later. Against my better judgment, I played it. "Mom, it's me." Daniel's voice sounded different, steadier, less entitled. "I'm not calling to ask for anything, I promise. I just, a pause. Then, "I'm going to be in Savannah next week for a conference. I'd like to see you, if you're willing, just to talk. Call me back if you want to. If not, I understand." I set the phone down and stared out the window at the oak tree in the courtyard, its branches heavy with Spanish moss. The old me would have called back immediately, eager to mend bridges at any cost. The new me wasn't so sure. I finished getting ready for work, tucking the phone into my bag without making a decision. The bookstore was busy that day. A local school had arranged a field trip, and 20 excited 8-year-olds filled the children's section, their enthusiasm for books both chaotic and heartwarming. "You're good with them," Rita observed as we watched a little girl with braids carefully count out dollars from her unicorn purse to buy a picture book. "Ever think about running our children's program? We could use someone for Saturday morning story time." "I'll think about it," I said, surprising myself with how appealing the idea was. By closing time, I still hadn't decided about Daniel's call. I mentioned it to Rita as we locked up. "What does your gut tell you?" she asked, peering at me over her purple reading glasses. "That's the problem. It's not clear." "Then maybe you need more information," she shrugged. "You can always meet him somewhere public, listen to what he has to say, and leave if it starts feeling wrong." "That's true, for what it's worth," Rita added. "People can change. Not everyone does, but it happens." I thought about that as I walked home in the evening light. Could Daniel have changed? Did I want to find out? Back at my apartment, I made a simple dinner: roasted vegetables and grilled chicken, a glass of white wine. As I ate, I scrolled through old photos on my phone, landing on one from years ago: Daniel at his high school graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling without reservation. Before I could talk myself out of it, I picked up my phone and dialed his number. "Mom!" His voice was startled, hopeful. "Hello, Daniel. Thank you for calling back. I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I." I admitted. What brings you to Savannah? Tech conference at the Riverfront Convention Center. I'm presenting a paper on software security. That sounds impressive. It's just work. A pause. I'd really like to see you while I'm there. I considered this. I could meet you for coffee Wednesday at 2:00. That would be great. Thank you. I gave him the name of a cafe near the bookstore Neutral Territory, as Rita had suggested. Mom, he said before we hung up, I just want you to know I've been doing a lot of thinking since everything. I'm glad to hear that. I'm trying to be better. That's good. Daniel, I hope you are. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, wondering if I'd made a mistake. The peace I'd built felt suddenly fragile, as if one conversation could unravel months of healing. But that night, as I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and saw someone stronger than the woman who had driven away from Daniel's wedding. Someone who could face her son without needing his approval or fearing his judgment. Whatever happened on Wednesday, I would be okay. The cafe was busy when I arrived, filled with the midday crowd of students, tourists, and locals. I chose a table by the window, positioned so I could see the door. Old habits die hard, and I'd always been early to everything. At exactly 2:00, Daniel walked in. He looked different, thinner. Yes, but also somehow more substantial. Less like the polished shell of a man I'd last seen in the coffee shop 6 months ago. He wore jeans and a simple button-down shirt, not the designer clothes I'd grown accustomed to seeing him in. He scanned the room, spotted me, and walked over with an uncertain smile. Mom, thank you for coming. I nodded, gesturing to the chair across from me. You're right on time. He sat down, fidgeting slightly with the menu. This place looks nice. They make good scones. A waitress came over, and we ordered black coffee for him, a latte for me, and 2 of the blueberry scones I'd recommended. An awkward silence fell between us as the waitress walked away. Daniel broke it first. You look really well, he said. Happy? I am. I'm glad. He seemed to mean it. Savannah suits you. It does. How are things with you? He took a deep breath. Better now? It was rough for a while after everything. Eliza mentioned some difficulties when she came to see me. His expression tightened slightly at the mention of his wife. Yes? We had to make some adjustments. Are you still living with her parents? No, we found a smaller apartment, more within our actual budget. He offered a self-deprecating smile. Turns out my salary doesn't stretch as far as I thought when I'm paying all my own bills. Our coffee arrived, giving us both a moment to collect our thoughts. Eliza's pregnant, he said suddenly. 3 months along? This caught me off guard. Congratulations. Thank you. We're excited, terrified, but excited. He stirred his coffee unnecessarily. It changes how you see things, impending parenthood. It certainly does. I keep thinking about what kind of father I want to be, what I want my child to learn from me. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly, and I realized I don't want to pass on the values I've been living by. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. The past 6 months have been educational. When you cut me off, I was angry. I blamed you for everything. But then I had to start figuring things out on my own, and I realized how much I'd been taking for granted. He shook his head. How much I'd been taking you for granted. That's a significant realization. It is. He pushed his coffee aside. Mom, I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the manipulative garbage I tried before. The way I treated you was inexcusable not just at the wedding, but for years before that. The words sounded rehearsed, but his eyes held a sincerity I hadn't seen in a long time. I won't ask for your forgiveness. He continued. I haven't earned it. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did wrong, and I'm trying to be better. I considered his words, trying to separate genuine remorse from the performance of remorse, something Daniel had always been skilled at when he needed something. What exactly do you understand, Daniel? He looked startled by the question, but gathered himself quickly. I understand that I treated you like a resource instead of a person, that I took your love and support and gave nothing back, that I was embarrassed by you when I should have been proud. His voice cracked slightly, and I understand that I may have permanently damaged our relationship beyond repair. I sipped my latte, letting his words settle between us. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm going to be a parent, because I want my child to know their grandmother, because I miss you. He spread his hands on the table, and because it's the right thing to do, even if nothing comes of it. For the first time in our conversation, I felt something soften inside me, not forgiveness exactly, but a willingness to consider that this might be genuine. How is Eliza handling the pregnancy? She's been sick a lot, working less. It's been hard on her. He hesitated. She's different too, since everything happened. More grounded. We both are. Financial difficulties have a way of clarifying priorities. It wasn't just the money, Mom. It was realizing how quickly everything could fall apart, how fragile our life was when it wasn't being subsidized by someone else. I nodded, understanding all too well. We've been in counseling, he added, both of us, working on our communication, our values, trying to build something healthier before the baby comes. This surprised me. The Daniel I knew would have considered therapy beneath him a sign of weakness. That takes courage, I acknowledged. Not as much courage as what you did walking away from everything to start over. I don't think I told you before, but I admire that, even though it hurt like hell at the time. Our scones arrived, giving me a moment to absorb this unexpected turn in the conversation. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the sweetness of the pastry contrasting with the bitter memories between us. So what happens now? I finally asked. Daniel brushed crumbs from his fingers, considering. That's up to you. I'd like to try to rebuild some kind of relationship, if you're willing, but I understand if you're not. What kind of relationship did you have in mind? An honest one. He smiled ruefully. One where I call you just to talk, not because I need something, where I listen to what's happening in your life instead of only talking about mine, where I treat you with the respect you've always deserved. I studied him, looking for the manipulative boy beneath the words of the man, but all I saw was someone struggling, genuinely, to be better than he had been. I won't make any promises, I said finally, but I'm willing to take small steps and see where they lead. Relief washed over his face. That's more than I hoped for. Thank you. We spent the next hour talking, really talking, for what felt like the first time in years. He told me about his work, about the changes he and Eliza had made in their lifestyle, about their preparations for the baby. I told him about the bookstore, my trips, my new friends. As we were preparing to leave, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrapped package. I brought you something. It's not much, but I opened it carefully. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a small open book. I saw it and thought of you, he said. No strings attached, just a thank you for meeting me today. The gesture was simple, thoughtful in a way his expensive presents never had been. I slipped it onto my wrist beside my grandmother's bracelet. It's lovely, thank you. Outside the cafe, we stood awkwardly, neither sure how to end this new kind of meeting. My presentation is tomorrow morning, he said, but I'm free for dinner afterwards, if you'd like to meet again. I considered this. Why don't you come to my apartment? I can cook something simple. I'd like that. He hesitated. then added, "Do you think, would it be okay if Eliza joined us? She's flying in tomorrow afternoon." This was the test, I realized, not just rebuilding a relationship with my son, but finding a way forward with the family he had chosen, the family that was now expanding to include my grandchild. "Yes," I said after a moment. "She's welcome too." The smile that spread across his face was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." We parted without hugging. We weren't there yet, but with a new understanding between us. As I watched him walk away, I felt neither the aching hope of our last meeting nor the hollow emptiness of our parting after the wedding. Instead, I felt something like cautious optimism, a willingness to see where this new path might lead. My apartment looked different through the eyes of a potential hostess. The furniture I'd assembled since moving to Savannah was eclectic, but comfortable, a mix of secondhand finds and a few quality pieces I'd allowed myself to purchase with my newfound financial freedom. I spent the morning at the bookstore, then the afternoon preparing a simple dinner: roast chicken, potatoes, a salad with ingredients from the farmer's market. Nothing fancy, but made with care. At 6:30, my doorbell rang. I smoothed my hands over my slacks and opened the door to find Daniel and Eliza standing there, both looking as nervous as I felt. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "These are for you," Eliza said, holding out a bouquet of mixed flowers. "Thank you for having us." "They're beautiful. Thank you." I took the flowers, noticing the absence of her designer clothing and perfect makeup. She looked younger, softer somehow, in a simple maternity dress and flat shoes. Daniel carried a small gift bag. "And this is from both of us. A housewarming gift, even though you've been here a while." Inside was a leather-bound journal with handmade paper. "For your new adventures," he explained, "so you can write about them." "That's very thoughtful." I led them into the living room, where I'd set out a cheese plate and drinks wine for me, sparkling water for them. The first few minutes were stilted, all of us trying too hard. But gradually, as we sat around my small coffee table, the conversation found a more natural rhythm. "Your place is lovely," Eliza said, looking around with what seemed like genuine appreciation rather than the polite disgust I'd grown accustomed to from her. "So bright and peaceful." "Thank you. It suits me." "I can see that." She hesitated. "Jessica, I want to apologize for my behavior when we first met, and at the wedding, and, well, for everything. I was judgmental and condescending, and I'm deeply sorry." Her directness surprised me. "Thank you for saying that. I mean it. I was raised to value all the wrong things: status, appearance, money." She placed a protective hand over her slightly rounded belly. "I don't want to pass those values on to our child." I glanced at Daniel, who was watching his wife with a mixture of pride and tenderness I'd never seen before. "Becoming parents changes your perspective," I offered. "It does," Daniel agreed. "Already, and the baby's not even here yet." As we moved to the dining table, the conversation flowed more easily. They told me about their new apartment, the parenting classes they were taking, their hopes and fears about becoming parents. "We decided not to find out the gender," Eliza said as we served dessert, a simple berry crumble. "We want to be surprised." "Have you thought about names?" I asked. They exchanged a look, some silent communication passing between them. "Actually," Daniel said, "if it's a girl, we were thinking about Jessica." The spoon I was holding clattered against my plate. "You don't have to do that." "We want to," Eliza said softly. "It would be an honor if you'd allow it." I blinked back unexpected tears. "I'd be honored as well." After dinner, as Daniel helped me clear the table, something he'd never done in his adult life before, Eliza wandered to my bookshelf, examining the photos I'd displayed. You look so happy in these, she commented, pointing to a picture of me on a sunset cruise in Charleston Harbor. I am happy, I said, realizing as I spoke that it was entirely true. Good. You deserve to be. As they prepared to leave, Daniel hung back while Eliza went to call for their ride. Mom, he said quietly, I have something else for you. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. It's not much, but it's a start. Inside was a check for $3,200, the exact amount he'd charged to my credit card for the honeymoon deposit. Daniel, you don't have to. I do. It's the first installment. I've set up automatic monthly transfers to pay back everything I took over the years. His expression was determined. I know it can't undo what happened, but it's important to me to make this right. I studied the check, then my son's face. Thank you. There's something else. He took a deep breath. We'd like you to be involved in the baby's life as much or as little as you want. Doctor's appointments, shopping for the nursery, being there for the birth if you'd like. No pressure, but the invitation is open. I'd like that very much. And we'd like to come visit you more often, if that's okay. Maybe make it a regular thing monthly, if your schedule allows. We could take turns traveling. The effort behind these suggestions, the planning, the commitment told me more than his words could about the changes he was trying to make. Let's start with one visit at a time and see how it goes, I said, not wanting to promise more than I could deliver emotionally. That's fair? He hesitated, then asked the question I could see had been on his mind all evening. Do you think you could ever forgive me? Truly forgive me? I considered this carefully. Forgiveness isn't a single moment. Daniel, it's a process. We're in that process now, and I'm willing to see where it leads. He nodded, accepting this incomplete but honest answer. That's all I can ask for. At the door, he surprised me by leaning in for a brief, awkward hug, the first physical contact we'd had since before the wedding. Thank you, he whispered, for giving me another chance. Thank you for earning it, I replied. After they left, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the moonlight on the courtyard below. The evening had been neither perfect nor terrible, just real, with all the complicated emotions that came with rebuilding something broken. I touched the book charm on the bracelet Daniel had given me, then the diamond bracelet from my grandmother that I now wore openly instead of hiding away. Old and new, side by side. Tomorrow, I would go back to my life, the bookstore, my friends, my independence. But something had shifted, a door opening to possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider. 6 months later. Push, Eliza. One more big push. The delivery room was a chaos of activity doctors, nurses, machines beeping, and Eliza's determined efforts to bring her child into the world. Daniel stood by her side, supporting her shoulders, his face a mixture of terror and awe. I waited in the corner, present but not intrusive, there at their specific request. The past 6 months had been a careful dance of boundaries and bridge building, monthly visits, weekly phone calls, small steps toward a new kind of relationship, not the unquestioning sacrifice of before, but something more balanced, more honest. There had been setbacks, moments when old patterns threatened to reemerge, when Daniel slipped into entitlement or I into martyrdom, but we'd navigated them together, both committed to creating something healthier. Eliza gave one final heroic push, and suddenly the room filled with the indignant cry of a new life entering the world. It's a girl, the doctor announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Eliza's chest. Daniel was openly weeping now, one hand on his daughter's tiny back, the other still clasping his exhausted wife's hand. Jessica, Eliza whispered, looking down at their daughter. Welcome to the world. Daniel looked up, his eyes finding mine across the room. Mom, do you want to come meet your granddaughter? I moved closer, looking down at the tiny, perfect face of this new person, this continuation of life, this fresh beginning. Hello, Jessica, I said softly, reaching out to touch her impossibly small fingers. She grasped my index finger with surprising strength, holding on as if to say, I'm here. I'm connecting us all. In that moment, looking at 3 generations of my family, I understood something profound about the cycle of giving and receiving, of hurt and healing, of endings and beginnings. Life would always include leftovers, those painful parts we have to digest and transform, but it also included fresh starts, new recipes, better ways of nourishing ourselves and each other. As if reading my thoughts, Daniel spoke. She'll know a different way, he promised quietly. She'll know her worth from the beginning. She'll know yours too. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Later, as I sat in a comfortable chair in the hospital room, holding my sleeping granddaughter while her parents rested, I looked out the window at the Savannah skyline. The sun was setting, painting the old buildings in gold and rose. A beautiful ending making way for whatever came next. Little Jessica shifted in my arms, her face peaceful in sleep, unaware of the complicated history that had led to this moment, unburdened by the mistakes we'd all made. She represented something precious, the possibility that we could learn from those mistakes, that we could do better with each new chance we were given. I thought about my journey from the woman who accepted leftovers to the woman who had built a life on her own terms, from the mother who gave too much to the grandmother who would give wisely, with boundaries and self-respect intact. The baby yawned, her tiny fist against her cheek. In a few minutes, Eliza would wake up and need to feed her. Daniel would take her from my arms with his new, careful competence as a father. Life would continue its forward motion. But for now, in this quiet moment between what was and what would be, I held the future in my arms and felt, at last, completely at peace. Not because everything was perfect, not because all wounds were healed, but because I had learned the most important lesson of all, that I deserved a place at the table of my own life, not just the leftovers, but the very best that life had to offer. And so did everyone else in this room. 10. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below with the city you're watching from. And I'll be back next week with 2 other stories that are channel favorites.